January 24th, 1945, 0645 hours, Husson, France. 10 degrees below zero, the kind of cold that turns rifle oil to paste, that makes steel burn your hands through gloves. First Lieutenant Garland Merle Connor lies flat in a shallow irrigation ditch, 30 yards from German infantry, with a field telephone pressed to his frozen ear, and he says 5 words that violate every human instinct. Drop it on my position. The artillery officer on the other end hesitates. You can hear it in the static, because what Connor just asked for is suicide dressed as tactics. He's requesting that American 105mm howitzers, firing from 400 yards behind friendly lines, concentrate their explosive shells directly on top of him while enemy soldiers are close enough to hear him breathing. This is not heroism. This is mathematics, the cold arithmetic of survival where one man's death buys time for hundreds. And the shells are already screaming downward. But here's what makes no sense. What breaks the pattern of every war story you've been told? This man, ordering his own death by artillery, is 5 feet 6 inches tall, weighs 120 pounds when soaking wet, came from a Kentucky farm family so poor the nearest high school was 15 kilometers away. He finished 8th grade, worked the Civilian Conservation Corps, enlisted March 1st, 1941. Nothing about his body suggests he could face down 6 Tiger Mark 6 tanks, each weighing 56 tons, equipped with 88mm cannons that could puncture Sherman armor from 2,000 yards out. And yet, when those tanks rolled toward his battalion at dawn, supported by 600 German infantry, Connor won. Not by accident, not by luck, but by improvising a tactic so brutally effective that it rewrote field manuals permanently. What he discovered in that frozen ditch, coordinating fire while hypothermia shut down his fingers, while machine gun rounds chewed the earth 6 inches from his head, became doctrine. They teach it at West Point now, at Moscow's military academies, at staff colleges across 3 continents. The principle, an advanced observer integrated with artillery, becomes the deadliest weapon on any battlefield, more lethal than armor, more devastating than numbers. But there's a conspiracy buried in this story, a 73-year injustice that should make you question what gets remembered and what gets erased. Because Garland Merle Connor saved hundreds of American lives, changed how modern warfare coordinates fire support, invented tactics that govern drone strikes and close air support today, and his own country ignored him until he'd been dead 20 years. Died in 1998 without the Medal of Honor he'd earned in 1945. His widow fought for 22 years, faced 3 rejections, watched a federal judge declare the claim had merit, but arrived too late. All while Connor's contribution was taught to soldiers who'd never heard his name. So the question becomes, why does a farm kid from Indian Creek, Kentucky, who stood 5'6" and weighed barely more than his rifle and ammunition, get forgotten when his innovation remains foundational? What does it say about glory, about recognition, about who gets written into history, and who gets left in frozen ditches even after they've crawled out alive? June 2nd, 1919, Clinton County, Kentucky, Indian Creek, tributary of the Cumberland River, near the settlement of Erin. Garland Merle Connor enters the world as the 3rd of 11 children born to Lee Arthur Connor and Tana Moore Pierce Connor. The family works land that doesn't give up its yield easily, acres of Kentucky soil that demand constant labor. There's no drama here, no Hollywood origin story of the underdog mocked and dismissed. The Connors are neither wealthy nor destitute. They occupy that American middle of rural subsistence, where work defines identity and complaint serves no purpose. The school sits 15 kilometers distant, accessible only by foot or wagon, and Connor's formal education ends after 8th grade, not because of failure, but because farms require hands and resources run thin when you're feeding 13 mouths. This is 1819 through the 1930s, The reality of rural America where education competes with survival and survival wins. But Connor learns anyway, learns from machinery that breaks and must be fixed, from weather that kills crops and demands adaptation, from work that never ends and never forgives weakness. By his late teens, he joins the Civilian Conservation Corps, that Depression-era program that takes young men and puts them to work on conservation projects. It's here that certain competencies crystallize: the ability to work under pressure without supervision, to improvise solutions with limited resources, to function as part of a unit while maintaining individual initiative. The CCC doesn't make soldiers, but it makes men capable of becoming soldiers. And when March 1st, 1941 arrives, Connor walks into a recruitment office and enlists. Now, understand what doesn't happen. No drill sergeant ridicules his size, no peers mock his Kentucky accent, no superior questions his capability. The myth of the bullied underdog who proves everyone wrong has no place in Connor's file. Instead, there's consistent competence, steady advancement through merit. Promoted to Technical Sergeant January 13th, 1944, then Second Lieutenant June 28th, 1944, then First Lieutenant December 29th, 1944. Each promotion earned through demonstrated ability, through the kind of judgment that keeps men alive when judgment matters most. He's assigned as Intelligence Officer for 3rd Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, a position requiring trust and tactical acumen. They don't give intelligence roles to incompetents. They give them to men who can assess terrain, anticipate enemy movement, coordinate assets under fire. Over 28 months of continuous frontline combat, Connor participates in 10 campaigns, 4 amphibious landings, and receives 7 Purple Hearts for wounds that would have sent lesser men home. But each time, he returns to the line, volunteers for dangerous reconnaissance, demonstrates the kind of reliability that makes commanders breathe easier. This matters because what happens at Husson isn't a fluke, isn't beginner's luck or desperate improvisation by someone who doesn't know better. It's calculated risk taken by a man who understands exactly what he's doing and chooses to do it anyway, because the alternative is watching his battalion die. January 24th, 1945, 0600 hours. Husson, France, Operation Grand Slam in its critical opening phase. The mission: collapse the Colmar Pocket, that German salient jutting into Allied-controlled Alsace like an infected tooth, threatening the entire southern flank. Eisenhower and Omar Bradley consider this the most serious strategic threat in Europe at the moment, more dangerous than residual German forces in the north, because the Colmar Pocket contains a bridge over the Rhine River, and control of that bridge means possible German invasion of southern Alsace or Allied opportunity to penetrate southern Germany. 3rd Battalion holds the left frontal flank, dug into positions around Husson, and they've been bleeding for days. 83 men lost in the previous 10 days. Casualties that hollow out a unit's fighting effectiveness, that replace experienced soldiers with replacements who don't know the terrain and don't know each other. It's minus 10 degrees Celsius most nights, snow 3 feet deep in some areas, and trench foot claims as many casualties as enemy fire. Men wrap their feet in burlap, try to keep circulation going, fail more often than they succeed. Connor should be safe, should be recovering in a field hospital from a hip wound sustained in earlier action. Standard procedure: wounded officer convalesces in the rear, returns when medical staff clears him for duty. But at 0645 hours, he hears the diesel rumble of heavy armor, that distinctive growl of Maybach engines pushing 56 tons of steel, and he knows what's coming before the first shell impacts. 6 Tiger Mark 6 tanks, supported by 600 German infantry, converging on 3rd Battalion's position in a coordinated assault designed to rupture American lines. Not a probing attack, not a spoiling raid, but a full commitment of armored reserves intended to break through, wheel north, and collapse the entire American offensive. The intelligence assessment is immediate and brutal. Without accurate artillery support, the battalion will be overrun within hours. Sherman tanks can't engage Tigers at range. Their 75mm guns effective to 1,200 yards, while the Tiger's 88mm can kill at 2,000. Infantry anti-tank weapons, the bazooka and rifle grenades, require close approach and perfect shot placement, suicide missions against buttoned-up armor supported by infantry. Artillery could work. The 3rd Battalion has access to 105mm howitzers with enough punch to crack Tiger armor, or at least mission kill the vehicles, rendering them immobile. But artillery firing blind, without forward observation, operates at perhaps 5% effectiveness against mobile armor. The shells land in general areas, sometimes close enough to rattle crews, rarely close enough to inflict critical damage. It's wasteful, it's ineffective, and it leaves Tigers free to maneuver and engage at will. The solution exists in Doctrine. It's taught at every artillery school. Forward observer coordinates fire in real time, watches shell impacts, radios corrections back to the gun line, adjusts trajectory and range until shells land on target. Simple in theory, impossible in practice at Husson, because radio requires line of sight or relay stations, neither of which survive under sustained artillery bombardment. The Germans know this. They target communication assets first, knock out radios and relay points, blind American fire support. Which leaves field telephone, that simple device of copper wire and electrical current, voice converted to signal and back again. But field telephone means someone has to physically run 800 yards of wire from the gun line forward to an observation position, has to establish and maintain that connection under fire, has to survive long enough to direct multiple fire missions. And the observation position itself, to be effective against Tigers assaulting 3rd Battalion, has to be forward of American lines, close enough to see enemy movement with precision, close enough that when you call for fire, you're calling it down on yourself. 3 options present themselves. First option, remain in the rear, let artillery fire blind, except that 3rd Battalion probably gets overrun, that the hospital with 500 wounded men sitting 10 kilometers behind American lines becomes vulnerable, that Operation Grand Slam falters, and the Colmar pocket remains a dagger pointed at Allied logistics. Safe option, orthodox option, the option that lets you sleep at night knowing you followed procedure. Second option, grab your Thompson submachine gun, run directly at 600 German infantry and 6 Tiger tanks, die heroically and uselessly within 30 seconds, accomplish nothing except adding 1 more name to the casualty list. Suicidal option, the option of desperation without calculation. Third option, take the telephone wire, run 400 yards through active artillery fire, establish an advanced observation post within 30 yards of German positions, coordinate fire for as long as the wire holds, and you remain conscious, except that this probably ends with your death but might save the battalion. Calculated suicide, the kind where the math says your death by something concrete. Connor doesn't deliberate, doesn't gather officers for a conference, doesn't request volunteers. The citation will later describe it precisely. Having recently rejoined his unit after recovering from wounds, realizing the devastating effect approaching enemy armor would have on the battalion, Lieutenant Connor voluntarily offered to advance directly into the heart of the enemy assault to reach a position from which he could direct friendly artillery fire upon the advancing enemy forces, having resolved to die if necessary to destroy the enemy. Advance. That phrase matters. Having resolved to die. Not hoping to survive, not trusting to luck, but making the conscious calculation that death serves a purpose here. It's the coldest form of courage, The kind that strips away all romance and leaves only arithmetic. If I die while directing fire, my battalion survives. If I retreat, we all die. Therefore, I advance. 0645 hours, Connor grabs a Thompson M1A1 submachine gun, 45 caliber, effective range 50 yards, worthless against armor, but adequate for close defense against infantry. He grabs a spool containing 800 yards of field telephone wire, grabs the telephone handset itself, and he runs. The artillery barrage has already started. German gunners targeting American positions, 105mm shells and 150mm shells, impacting with enough force to uproot trees, to throw frozen earth 30 feet into the air, to kill through concussion alone, even without direct hit. Connor runs through this, wire spooling out behind him, and it's not heroic dash through enemy fire like cinema portrays. It's calculated movement from covered position to covered position. It's terror management and muscle memory from 28 months of frontline existence. It's the knowledge that hesitation means death, but movement means possibility. 400 yards through snow that drags at boots, through frozen ground that provides no traction, through air temperature cold enough that each breath burns your lungs. Shrapnel hisses past, hot metal meeting frozen air with a sound like tearing canvas. Trees disintegrate, branches falling like javelins. The wire catches on debris. Connor yanks it free, keeps moving, because stopping means the wire becomes useless, and the wire is the only thing that matters. He reaches American forward positions, and instead of stopping, instead of taking refuge in a fighting hole where reasonable men shelter, he continues forward another 30 yards until he finds a shallow irrigation ditch, maybe 18 inches deep, maybe 3 feet wide, offering minimal protection and maximum exposure. This is the position. This is where the physics work. Close enough to observe German armor with precision. Close enough that when artillery impacts, he can see exactly where shells land relative to targets. Close enough that German infantry will eventually realize he's here and try to kill him. Connor connects the field telephone, cranks the generator, makes contact with the gun line. The voice on the other end, probably a lieutenant or captain manning the fire direction center, responds immediately. They've been waiting for this, hoping someone would provide forward observation, knowing that without it, they're firing blind. Connor identifies himself, provides grid coordinates, begins calling targets. Now understand the mechanism. Understand what makes this work against all probability. The field telephone operates on simple electrical principles, Ohm's law made practical. Voltage equals current times resistance. Voice creates sound waves. Sound waves vibrate a diaphragm. Diaphragm movement generates electrical current. Current travels through copper wire to receiving station. Receiving diaphragm converts current back to sound. 800 yards of copper wire, even damaged wire, even wire lying in snow and mud, conducts enough current for voice communication. It's robust technology, World War I vintage, proven across millions of field deployments. Connor watches the first ranging shot impact, 200 yards short and 50 yards left of the lead Tiger tank. He calls the correction, right 50, add 200. The gun crew adjusts elevation and traverse, fires again. This shot lands 100 yards short, still left. Connor corrects again, right 30, add 100. Each correction takes maybe 10 seconds. Each adjustment brings fire closer to target. This is the feedback loop. Observe, communicate, adjust, fire, repeat. And it requires that Connor maintain consciousness, maintain communication, maintain observation despite everything the German military throws at him. The German infantry spots him within 20 minutes. They have to, because artillery shells landing with precision don't arrive by accident. Someone's directing fire, which means someone's observing, which means someone's close enough to see. Machine gun fire starts, MG-42 firing 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute. That buzzsaw sound of German Doctrine, suppressive fire designed to keep heads down and observation impossible. Rounds impact the ditch edges, chew frozen earth, but Connor doesn't need to stand to observe. He only needs to see, and he can see plenty from 18 inches of depth. Mortar fire follows, German crews walking 81mm mortar rounds toward his position, trying to bracket him, trying to drop high explosive shells directly into the ditch. Close impacts throw dirt and shrapnel. Blast waves compress air hard enough to rupture eardrums if you're unlucky. But mortars lack precision, and Connor keeps moving within the ditch, never staying in one position long enough for them to range him effectively. German artillery responds. Their gunners calculating backward from American shell impacts, determining roughly where observation must be occurring, dropping 105mm and 150mm rounds in the general area. This is the moment of maximum danger, because friendly artillery is impacting forward of Connor's position, hitting German armor and infantry, while enemy artillery is impacting rearward, trying to kill him and sever the telephone wire. He's caught between two walls of explosive steel, and the wire is his lifeline. The wire breaks, the first time within 40 minutes. Electrical connection dies. Voice cuts out mid-sentence. Connor crawls out of the ditch, locates the break, severed by shrapnel or blast concussion, and he repairs it with frozen fingers that barely respond to commands from his brain. Hypothermia is setting in, -10°C for hours now. No movement to generate body heat, and the sympathetic nervous system is starting to fail. He twists wire ends together, restores circuit, crawls back to the ditch, resumes directing fire. The wire breaks again, then again. Each time, Connor crawls out, exposes himself to machine gun fire and artillery, repairs the connection, returns. Each repair takes perhaps 2 minutes. 2 minutes when artillery fire isn't being adjusted, when German armor has freedom to maneuver, when infantry can advance. But the alternative is abandoning the position, letting the Tigers reach American lines, watching the battalion collapse. 3 hours. From 0645 hours until approximately 0945 hours, Connor remains in that ditch, directing fire, dodging bullets, repairing wire, ignoring hypothermia and blast concussion, and the growing realization that German infantry is closing the distance. At the closest approach, enemy soldiers come within 5 yards, close enough that Connor can hear them speaking German, can see individual features on faces, can recognize expressions of fear and determination identical to what American soldiers wear. This is the final moment, the point where mathematics becomes theology. German infantry is preparing to rush his position, to overwhelm him with numbers, to eliminate the observer who's been destroying their assault for 3 hours. They're bunched up, gathered for the charge, and Connor makes the calculation. He cranks the field telephone, establishes contact, and he orders concentration of fire directly on his own position. The artillery officer on the other end hesitates. The documented record shows this, because dropping shells on your own observer violates every safety protocol in existence. But Connor insists, and the first volley screams inward. 105mm high explosive shells, few set for airburst, detonating 20 feet above ground level to maximize fragmentation effect. The blast wave hits Connor like a physical wall. Dirt and steel fragments rain down, and he presses himself into the bottom of the ditch while death arrives from friendly guns. The German assault breaks, not from courage, not from determination, but from physics. You cannot advance through airburst artillery without accepting catastrophic casualties, and the German infantry realizes that the man in the ditch has chosen mutual destruction over retreat. They pull back, disengaging, dragging wounded, leaving approximately 50 dead and twice that number injured on ground that Connor can see from his observation post. The Tiger tank stalled, attempting to maneuver around the artillery fire but lacking infantry support, and American gunners shift fire to hit them directly. Armor-piercing shells now, kinetic penetrators, and while Tigers don't die easily, they can be mission-killed. Tracks broken, engines damaged, optics destroyed. 6 tanks immobilized or damaged, the German armored reserve neutralized without a single Sherman engaging directly. 3rd Battalion holds. The hospital 10 kilometers behind American lines remains untouched. Operation Grand Slam continues, collapses the Colmar pocket by February 9th, destroys the German 19th Army as a coherent fighting force, opens the path into southern Germany. All of it hinges on 3 hours in an irrigation ditch, 1 man with a field telephone, 800 yards of copper wire. February 10th, 1945. General Alexander Patch, commanding 7th Army, presents the Distinguished Service Cross to 1st Lieutenant Garland Merle Connor. It's the 2nd highest American military decoration, recognition of extraordinary heroism, and it's deserved. But it's not the Medal of Honor, and that distinction will matter for 73 years. Major General Lloyd B. Ramsey, who commanded 3rd Battalion during the action, later provides an affidavit that cuts through bureaucracy like artillery through fog. There is no doubt in my mind that Lieutenant Connor should have been awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. One of my most disappointing regrets in my career is not having ensured the Medal of Honor was awarded to the most remarkable soldier I had the privilege to command. The tactic Connor improvised becomes doctrine. Military academies incorporate it into curriculum, the principle of advanced observer integrated with artillery fire becoming foundational to modern combined arms warfare. You see it in every close air support mission where joint terminal attack controllers direct fighter aircraft against ground targets. You see it in modern artillery coordination, where forward observers equipped with laser rangefinders and digital radios provide real-time fire correction. You see it in drone warfare, where unmanned aircraft observe while controllers direct precision munitions. The innovation isn't technology, it's concept. Observation plus communication plus responsive fire support equals lethality that transcends numerical advantage or armor superiority. 1 man, positioned correctly, communicating effectively, can neutralize forces that would otherwise require divisions to counter. This is what Connor proved, not in theory, but in frozen reality, and it changed how warfare functions. But recognition requires advocacy, requires someone willing to fight bureaucracy with the same determination Connor showed fighting Germans. His widow, Pauline, begins that fight in 1997, petitioning the Army Board for correction of military records to upgrade Connor's Distinguished Service Cross to Medal of Honor. First petition, rejected. Second petition, 2000, rejected again, no new evidence to warrant formal hearing. 2006, historian Richard Chilton locates 3 eyewitnesses who never provided formal statements, documents their testimony. 2008, Pauline resubmits, 2 years past the legal deadline. 2009, rejected, Board declares the new evidence insufficient and the timeline violation prohibitive. 2014, Federal Court, Judge Thomas B. Russell issues an 11-page opinion acknowledging Connor's service, but affirming that technical limitations preclude relief. The law is the law. Deadlines are deadlines, and justice deferred becomes justice denied. Then, somehow, political will shifts. Congressional advocacy, veteran support, documentation that overwhelms bureaucratic resistance. June 26, 2018, 73 years after Connor directed artillery fire from an irrigation ditch, President Donald Trump presents the Medal of Honor to Pauline Connor, widow of the recipient, in the East Room of the White House. Connor died in 1998, 20 years before recognition arrived. He never saw the medal, never heard the citation read at formal ceremony, never received acknowledgement from his nation that his innovation mattered. He returned to Kentucky after the war, worked his small farm, raised children, and disappeared from public consciousness. The second most decorated soldier of World War II became a footnote, remembered by his community but unknown to history. The injustice isn't that recognition came late, though 73 years strains the definition of justice. The injustice is that it required 22 years of advocacy, multiple rejections, federal court intervention, and political reversal to acknowledge what was obvious in February 1945. Connor saved hundreds of lives, invented a tactic that became doctrine, changed how modern warfare coordinates fire support. And bureaucracy said, prove it again, then prove it again, then prove it again, until the man you're honoring is dead and can't hear the words. What Connor demonstrated wasn't superhuman ability, wasn't genetic advantage or privileged training. He was 5 feet 6 inches tall, weighed 120 pounds, finished 8th grade, came from a family that worked land for subsistence. Nothing about his origin suggested military innovation. Nothing about his body suggested capacity for 3-hour combat under conditions designed to kill. And yet, when the moment arrived, when the choice presented itself between retreat and engagement, between safety and sacrifice, he chose engagement because the alternative meant watching his battalion die. The lesson isn't that anyone can be a hero, that's Hollywood mythology. The lesson is that competence plus determination plus willingness to accept consequence can achieve outcomes that seem impossible beforehand. Connor didn't defeat 6 Tiger tanks and 600 German infantry because he was extraordinary. He defeated them because he understood the problem, identified the solution, and executed despite knowing execution would probably kill him. That's not heroism in the classical sense. That's engineering applied to warfare. That's mathematics weaponized against numerical superiority. Modern soldiers learn this. They study Husson as case study in forward observation. They analyze the decision tree that led Connor into that irrigation ditch. They debate whether they would make the same choice. Some would, most wouldn't, and both answers are honest. Because what Connor did wasn't natural, wasn't instinctive. It was calculated defiance of survival instinct in service of tactical necessity. It was choosing to die so others might live, not an abstract heroic sacrifice, but in concrete operational reality. 78 years later, the principle endures. Every drone operator directing Hellfire missiles, every JTAC calling close air support, every forward observer adjusting artillery fire operates on the innovation Connor improvised from desperation. The technology changed, copper wire became radio, became satellite data link, but the concept remains identical. Observation plus communication plus responsive fire support equals decisive advantage. Garland Merle Connor wasn't a giant, wasn't physically imposing, wasn't blessed with advantages. He was small, rural, modestly educated, and when his moment arrived, he proved that size doesn't determine courage, that origin doesn't limit capability, that one man positioned correctly and willing to accept consequence can change the outcome of battles, of campaigns, of wars. That's the legacy, not a medal awarded 73 years late, but a principle proven true in frozen French soil and taught today to soldiers who will never know his name, but will employ his innovation.